a nerd, a geek growing up? Where did you get to the point where, you lived in Bombay and you came to America and you're creating email? I mean, who
Yeah, it's
does
a
that?
good question. Yeah, I think typically people ask me this question in the beginning, but I think it's a good way to sort of close it. But yeah, let me give you my journey.
Mhm.
Right. So I was born in India in 1963, December 2nd, 1963. I left India on December 2nd, 1970, literally on my seventh birthday. Okay.
Mhm.
And my parents, we grew up in this caste system in India. We knew that the future was getting out of India, and America offered a lot more opportunities. When I landed in Kennedy Airport, it took us 3 days to get in those days to the United States, Anthony. I was wearing shorts. I didn't know it was, I've never seen winter. I didn't even know what snow was.
Right.
And it was this light, beautiful snow that was coming down as I was getting off, those on the TWA flight on those stairs. And
Mhm.
very nice um, couple, an African American couple in Patterson. That's where we settled. Came with my father, and they took us to the Salvation Army because we didn't have any clothes. So people don't know Salvation Army is like a
Mhm.
thrift store. We got all of our winter
Right.
clothes. So I initially grew up in Patterson, which is still one of the poorest cities in the United States. And my parents really believed in education. And that was instilled into us, like education is the way you liberate yourself. You know,
Mhm.
you're a slave if you don't get educated. So we lived in Patterson, and whatever money my parents would make, and by the way, my dad, who was a very smart engineer, would always get paid 1/3 less than his white counterparts. Okay. Okay. But that's, what it was in those days. But then, so my parents' next town that they moved to was a town that was a working class town of blacks and whites called Clifton, New Jersey.
Mhm.
And then we stayed there until fourth grade. And then we moved to another town called Parsippany, which had a little bit of a better school system, all public schools.
Okay.
My parents could never afford it. My mom was very against private schools, just on the elitist notion. She was very
Okay.
principled. And then at the age of 14, to give you an idea, I was a star pitcher. Many people said I could have
Okay.
gone to the major leagues. I could throw fastball. I was a shortstop. I was on the all division in all of New Jersey, the number one division, the high school that won undefeated soccer. I was a center
Okay.
half. So my father believed that you have to be mind and body. You don't just be a nerd, you have to be both.
Yeah,
So I
that's
was a
me too.
very good athlete, soccer, baseball, tennis. And I was hard worker. I worked my butt off. Um,
Mhm.
I would, play, do my sports and come home at about 8 p.m. And between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m., I would do math problems.
Okay.
And so in eighth grade was a big transition point because a year before, Anthony, in seventh grade, I had gone off to India again. My grandmother was was dying. And you have to understand,
Mhm.
my other grandmother in India was a village healer. She was
Right.
a
Right.
shaman. Okay. My grandmother could look at your face. She could predict what's going on in your
Mhm.
body. She learned all these ancient medical sciences. All right. So I had learned about medicine. I had learned about the caste system. So, 1975, 76, I go back to India to visit my grandparents. And that's when I realized, that's when everything hits me, Anthony, politically, even
Mhm.
starker, like, wow, here I'm in this village where there's no roads, there's no running water,
Right.
right? And here, you walk around with your bare feet, and that my grandparents are very, very poor. My grandmother would plant rice in the rice fields. She would come home with
Mhm.
leeches on her legs, right? These are very poor people. That's when I realized, oh my God,
Yeah.
America and the United States or India are so different that
Yeah.
in the next 2 weeks, I'll be going back to that world, America, and I will
Okay.
have
Right.
all these luxuries that my grandparents will never have. My aunt lived in a little 10-foot by 10-foot hut, right? So that's when something in me, and I don't know where it came from. I think it came from a message from God, said, you better do something with your life. You better not
Mhm.
be a parasite. And it was very deep, Anthony. And I remember leaving the train station, the caboose train station, looking out the window. My grandparents, great love, they're crying. I'm crying because I know I may not see them for a long time. But this thought descended from the top
Mhm.
of my head to my whole body. I can't describe it. I can still feel it. It said, you better do something with your life to help these people, help all people. So when I got back, I decided I was going to be a great student, like the best, like I was
Mhm.
in athletics.
Right.
So by the 8th grade, by the 9th grade, I had finished calculus. I had a very interesting teacher who let us go as fast as we wanted. So I blew past algebra, I blew past trigonometry, algebra 1 and 2, but calculus was only offered to the seniors, right? In the 12th grade, but I finished it by 9th grade. And so my high school had no more math courses to offer me. And lo and behold, my mom, who was, again, very, very enterprising, very smart, worked her butt off in addition to being a great mother. A friend of hers had given a little news clipping of an article that came out in the Washington Times, which is a little newspaper in New York. Okay. And the newspaper article said that there was a professor at NYU who had gotten some money from the National Science Foundation to select 40 students across the entire United States in a competitive selection process. Then we would be allowed to go to NYU, the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences, which is one of the most preeminent institutions in the world. And these 40 students would get an intensive, like a Navy SEAL type program to study computer science. Okay. In a very intensive 2-month, 3-month program. I was in the 9th grade. I was actually not even allowed to apply because only for people who were in the 11th grade. Anyway, I applied. I got great recommendation letters. I had very good grades. And because I completed calculus, they had to consider me like a senior. So I get accepted. Okay. So I get accepted into this elite program, the only dark-skinned Indian kid from New Jersey. And at that time, and I was at that time, my parents had gone to a new high school called Livingston, New Jersey, which was predominantly all Jewish kids. And Jewish kids, very nice kids, but on the summertime, their parents would send them to Israel. And my friends would transform. They'd come back rabid animals wanting to kill every Palestinian. Nice kids, they'd come back wanting to kill every Palestinian. But one of the philosophies was that only Jewish people could be smart. They're the chosen people, right? And me and my sister were only the 2 Indian kids, dark skinned. There were no blacks, on 4,000 white kids. All right. So you can imagine the situation there. Okay. I'd have to work 3 times harder to get the A. Right. And I can tell you many, many stories there. Anyway, but I get accepted to this program. I graduate that program number 1 out of 40 kids. All right. The head of that program was a guy called Henry Mullish, who moved to Israel. And I, several years ago, I went and gave his memorial lecture in Israel. So I graduate number 1 in that class. Now I got to go back to high school. High school's pretty boring. I have to take humanities. Yeah, so I got to go back to high school.